rest. And so she's not quite aware yet because she's remote from grief. She's not caught up by care, and she doesn't recall anything of the sorrow here. But then a slow, faint remembrance, shadow-like, moved, and sighing, she laid her hand upon her bosom, and recognized the close and lingering ache, deep, quiet, old, made natural to its place. Well, why does he say that it's a faint remembrance that moved in a shadow-like way? Because Mother tells us that since the beginning of creation, I'm not there yet at the beginning today, but it will be page 9. From the beginning of the creation, Mother said, I was always here. From the very beginning of the evolution, she was here when humanity was not here. And so now she's feeling this ache, this deep, quiet, old ache, but she doesn't know where it came from. Because the power that kindles mind was still withdrawn. Oh, that's very interesting. But these servitors, these servants of life, were heavy, unwilling, like workers, he says, with no wages of delight. And now the torch of sense is not burning yet, and only a vague earth nature has held her frame. Interesting. But now she stirred. Her life shared the cosmic load. This is the first time we hear of this in Savitri. After 9 pages, we see that her strong, far-winging spirit has traveled back. But back to what? Back to the yoke of ignorance and fate. Back to the labor and stress of mortal days. And so we see finally all came back to her. Earth and love and doom. And let's note that Sri Aurobindo has capitalized these 3 words, earth, love, and doom. Now he says, when he's speaking about earth, he says evolution takes place on the earth, and therefore the earth is the proper field for progression. The beings of the other worlds do not progress from one world to another. They remain fixed in their own type. And he's speaking here of the gods that we know. The gods, most of them, don't want to take birth because it's such a difficult struggle. And we have to take birth so many times. The Vedas tell us that it took us 1,000 births to get here. 1,000. I've also heard that, pardon?
No, I think they say you should have at least 3 lakh births to have become a human being. I don't know, I thought it was more than that.
It could be more than that. This is just one Vedic thing that I've learned. Now, the next thing is that he capitalizes love. And Sri Aurobindo tells us in the Letters on Yoga that love is an intense self-expression of the soul of Ananda. And lastly, we have doom, of course. And doom is inevitable destruction or ruin. So now we see that the ancient disputants encircled her. Who are the disputants? Well, we're going to find out who they are. And I have to go to the next page, page 10. Yeah. They looked like giant figures, like giant figures wrestling in the night. Then there's a colon after the word night. And he tells us the Godheads from the dim inconscient born. These Godheads have been born from the dim inconscient, awoke to struggle and the pang divine. Now, and in the shadow of her flaming heart, at the somber center of the dire debate, a guardian of the unconsoled abyss, inheriting the long agony of the globe, a stone-still figure of high and godlike pain, stared into space with fixed, regardless eyes that saw grief's timeless depths, but not life's goal. Here we have a lot to go over. Savitri is now surrounded by these disputants, these people who are going to argue against the descent of the light, against the manifestation of something higher. And they are Godheads, certainly, but they are born from the inconscient. And he even says the dim inconscient. But now they have awakened, awoke to struggle and the pang divine. Well, what is this pang divine?
The yearning.
Pang divine is a pain, a very severe pain, but it is divine pain because they have to struggle. And what do they have to struggle against? All of this inconscient matter that is so tamasic, that is totally resistant to the light. Now he goes back to Savitri and he says, and in the shadow of her flaming heart, one has to try and see this flaming heart. Huta has made some paintings under Mother's guidance. And in the shadow of her flaming heart, comma, at the somber center of the dire debate. Well, what is somber to us? What does somber mean?
It's very gloomy and sad.
Yes, gloomy and dim and shadowy, yes. But it's also understood as being extremely serious, grave. So it's a somber center of this dire debate. The debate eventually is going to be the challenge with death, the dire debate. So at the somber center of this debate that Savitri is going to have with these dim Godheads, a guardian of the unconsoled abyss, inheriting the long agony of the globe, and there's comma after, a stone-still figure of high and godlike pain, stared into space with fixed, regardless eyes, that saw grief's timeless depths, but not life's goal. Oh, we have to go back and remember the emanations that Mother sent down. There were 4 of them, and they were beautiful emanations. They were love and they were truth. But they felt their power and turned against the divine and the Divine Mother. Love became hate. So this being, this stone-still figure of high and godlike pain, this guardian of the unconsoled abyss, who has inherited the long agony of the globe. And he stares with fixed, regardless eyes into space, sees the timeless depths of grief, but does not see life's goal. Because he is afflicted. Afflicted is distressed with the mental or bodily pain, or troubled greatly, grievously depressed. He's bound to his throne. He waited, unappeased, not pacified, not satisfied. He's waiting unappeased, the daily oblation of her unwept tears. An oblation is an offering made to a deity. So he's waiting for Savitri's unwept tears. What a strong statement. And therefore, all the fierce question of man's hours relived. The fierce question of man's hours is that we have not progressed truly from the state of body, life, and mind. It's better, yes. When we are able to progress into the higher mind, the illumined and the intuitive mind and the overmind, there will not be this fierce question of man's hours any longer. But, he says next, the sacrifice of suffering and desire earth offers to the immortal ecstasy began again beneath the eternal hand. Now, what is this sacrifice of suffering and desire that earth offers to the immortal ecstasy? Well, when the divine, who is all-powerful, immutable, transcendent, decides to descend into a human body to teach us the way, to show us the way, it's a sacrifice for him. It's a sacrifice of suffering and desire. He would love to be up there. But, if we look very, very widely at this is a game that's being played by the divine with himself. He didn't have to come from these heights. He didn't have to create evolution or even the 10 stages of avatarhood. He didn't have to do any of these things. He chose to do it to see other aspects of himself. And so we see that he's suffering because earth offers to the immortal ecstasy, intense joy or delight. And this offering that earth offers is the sacrifice of suffering and desire. And we see now that all this fierce question of man's hours has to be relived. And we talked in previous evenings of how the earth has been destroyed. Mother said 6 times. Totally destroyed. Civilizations that were far ahead of us technologically, even occultly, they were destroyed. Why were they destroyed? Because they forgot the divine. So these are the fierce questions of man's hours that are being relived and begun again beneath the eternal hand. Now, Sri Aurobindo is going to talk to us more about Savitri. And he'll begin with this very powerful line: awake, she endured the moment's serried march. Now, the word serried has two R's in it. It's not serried. It's not in a series. A serried march is when people are pressed together and pushing each other and walking together. That's the serried moment, the serried march of the moments that she has to endure. Now, serried is a word that Sri Aurobindo coined, and he uses it as an adjective. And it's a group or a number of related things or events that are arranged in some order. So we have a series of things, and we know that. But the word he coined is serried. So he puts a D at the end of it. Now, what does Savitri do? And looked on this green, smiling, dangerous world, and heard the ignorant cry of living things. Wow. Awake, she endured the moment's serried march, and looked on this green, smiling, dangerous world, and heard the ignorant cry of living things. Well, we hear it today. We hear every day the ignorant cry of living things. Terrorism, earthquakes, volcanoes, all kinds of things. Thousands and hundreds of thousands of people being killed each day. Each day. The ignorant cry of living things. Do you know, I was watching a film last night, and it was about drugs coming into America. And at the very end, they said more than 200,000 people were killed last year from drugs. And that was more than the entire Vietnam War. Wow. He continues. Amid the trivial sounds, the unchanging scene, her soul arose, confronting time and fate. So this is the first time we see that Savitri has arisen and able to confront both time and fate. What is going to happen next? Well, you see, he's preparing us for the next two lines. Immobile in herself, she gathered force. This was the day when Satyavan must die. Now, that is the end of Canto 1. He ends it with that one line, that powerful line. We didn't know what was happening until then. We knew that the earth was in travail and Savitri was awakening, and at first her mind was not there, but then she gathers force and she's able to confront these gods. And who is Satyavan? Sri Aurobindo tells us very clearly. Satyavan is the soul carrying the divine truth of being within itself, but descended into the grip of death and ignorance. So he has the divine truth of being within himself, but he had to come in, take birth, the grip of ignorance and death. Now he says in Savitri, Book 10, he, the eternal's delegate soul in man, the soul of the world, called Satyavan, the soul of the world, called Satyavan, freed from thy clutch of pain and ignorance, that he may stand master of life and fate. Sri Aurobindo further tells them in Savitri, on Book 10, Canto 4, man's representative in the house of God, the mate of wisdom and the spouse of light, the eternal bridegroom of the eternal bride. Oh. So now we're going to have to go to the next line, next canto, Canto 11. He begins, and this is all about Savitri. It is such an incredible canto about Savitri. Book 1, Canto 2, he calls it the issue, what she has to face. A while, withdrawn in secret fields of thought, her mind moved in a many-imaged past that lived again and saw its end approach. Dying, it lived imperishably in her, transient and vanishing from transient eyes, invisible, a fateful ghost of self, it bore the future on its phantom breast. There's a lot to go through with you here, so we'll begin. So imperishably, it passed, she's seeing this past that her mind is moving in. She sees the end of this path approach, but it lived again because she's seeing her past lives. That's exactly what she's seeing. And dying this past, it still lived imperishably in her, not subject to any decay or deterioration. But it is transient. That means passing with time, only a brief time. Transient and vanishing from transient eyes, invisible, it's invisible, a fateful ghost of self. It bore the future on its phantom breast. Notice the words he uses here, so beautiful. First of all, he speaks about the past. Then he speaks about it being transient and vanishing from transient eyes. Then he speaks of a ghost and a phantom. So all of this she is seeing now, seeing very clearly who she was before, what she had to go through before. Mother does tell us a little bit once in a while about past lives. You might have read where she went into this, it was a cave or a subterranean basement. And she said, "Get me out of here right away," because her head had been cut off there. Yeah. So Mother knew all of her past lives, of course, but very rarely she spoke about them. Now, we go to the next. We're seeing that she's looking at this thing as if it's a ghost, but that ghost is bearing the future on its phantom breast. Very, very interesting. And now we're going to see so beautiful passages. Along the fleeting events' far backward trail, regressed the stream of the insistent hours, And on the bank of the mysterious flood, peopled with well-loved forms now seen no more, and the subtle images of things that were, her witness spirit stood reviewing time. Now we have all learned about the witness spirit. It is the soul, not the psychic being, but the soul that stands behind and looks at everything we are doing without judgment, without criticism, and in absolute silence. It looks at us. We all have the witness soul. The psychic being, some don't have. Some have it in a very rudimentary form, but the psychic being is what evolves in us, leading us forward into a higher and higher evolution. The soul is pure, untouchable, stainless, and supporting all of us in our evolution. Okay, so we see that this fateful ghost of self, fateful, prophetic, ominous in fact, it bore the future on its phantom breast. Now, phantom here is an interesting word because it's an image that appears real, but it's an illusion. Almost we could say it is a ghost. And he uses the word ghost in the line above. See how Sri Aurobindo brings us into all these terms that we would not think of so much. What is a fateful ghost of self? And we could go on in that line for 10 minutes because it is so incredible. And we see that it's transient. We see that it's vanishing even from transient eyes. So one looks at something and sees just a hint of something, and one realizes this is my past. You have read Dina Merriam's books? Well, she has seen very clearly many past lives. So,
but why self is with ghost, Narad?
what?
Why he compares the self with ghost, fateful ghost?
The ghost. That's a good question. The ghost is usually an emanation of a person who left his body but is still around on the earth and has not been able to go into its place of rest. And so that's how people see ghosts. Yeah. They're not really serious. They don't hurt us, but they are scary. So we'll go a few more lines yet because this is so important. And on the bank of the mysterious flood, this flood of people, peopled, see, next line, peopled. Peopled means populated, peopled with well-loved forms, now seen no more, and the subtle images of things that were, her witness spirit stood reviewing time. Now, I want to share with you some things that Sri Aurobindo said about these subtle images. He says in the letters on yoga, subtle images can be images of all things in all worlds. And then he says again in another letter, these are not mental images. There is an inner vision that opens when one does sadhana, and all sorts of images rise before it or pass. Their coming does not depend upon your thought or will. It is real and automatic. Just as your physical eyes see things in the physical world, so the inner eyes see things and images that belong to the other worlds, and subtle images of things of this physical world also. Savitri's witness spirit then is looking back on all of this, and she's reviewing time. And in her reviewing of time, she's going to see the following. All that she once had hoped and dreamed and been. Look at that. Hoped, dreamed, and been. So all the things that she once was, all the things she once dreamed about, all the things she once hoped about, flew past her, eagle-winged, through memory's skies. And then this lovely, lovely section. As in a many-hued, flaming inner dawn, her life's broad highways and its sweet bypaths lay mapped to her sun-clear recording view. And what are these? Oh, from the bright country of her childhood's days, and the blue mountains of her soaring youth, and the paradise groves and peacock wings of love, to joy, clutched under the silent shadow of doom, in a last turn where heaven raced with hell. We have to go through that. She's seeing everything that she once was, but it's all flying past her like an eagle, eagle-winged, through memory skies. And as in this many-hued, this gradation of colors, many-hued, flaming inner dawn in her, as in that in her, she sees her life's broad highways and its sweet bypaths, but they're all lay mapped to her sun-clear recording view. And what are they? From the bright country of her childhood's days. Remember, Savitri was a princess. She lived in a beautiful palace. She had all these great water fountains, these carvings, these gardens, all these things. Bright country of her childhood's days. Next, and the blue mountains of her soaring youth. Remember when she's traveling to meet Satyavan? All these blue mountains are there. And when she finally arrives, she sees these mountains right behind Satyavan. Blue mountains. Mountains very often can look blue. In America, I have often driven on a place called the Blue Ridge Mountains, where the atmosphere is so beautiful, it's almost blue, almost a pure blue. So the blue mountains of her soaring youth and the paradise groves and peacock wings of love. Obviously here we're seeing the future, her with Satyavan. The paradise groves. She enters with her chariot into this big open pasture where she sees the birds, the bees, the butterflies, the endless colors of flowers, paradise grove, and peacock wings of love. Well, it reminds us of Krishna, doesn't it? And Krishna's love. And then what happens? It's all joy. To joy. But that joy is clutched under the silent shadow of doom. Yeah, she has to find out that Satyavan's going to die in 12 months. And so it's a silent shadow of doom because she has to meet death and confront him with the supramental light in a last turn where heaven raced with hell. Heaven raced with hell. Interesting line in Savitri. None can enter heaven who has not passed through hell. And I'm going to end with these last lines. 12 passionate months led in a day of fate. The day of fate is the day when Satyavan gives up his body and death comes to her to take him away. So that's the day of fate. So she had 12 months with him. That was guaranteed. That's what Narad said was his fate. He would live for 12 months. And we'll get into that part much later on, but Sri Aurobindo tells us something that reminds me very much of the cloud of darkness. He says, an absolute supernatural darkness falls on man sometimes when he draws near to God. An absolute supernatural darkness, unexplained by natural law or phenomenon, a supernatural darkness falls on man sometimes when he draws near to God. He has a colon after the word God because he's going to continue. Now, they have changed this in the latest edition of Savitri, this next line, an hour arrives when fail all nature's means. Previous to this, the line always read, an hour comes when fail all nature's means. If we beat it in iambic pentameter, an hour comes when fail all nature's means. If we say an hour arrives, okay, I won't say anything more. Forced out from the protecting ignorance. Ignorance is our protection. When we don't know something, we're quite at ease. Yeah, I don't know that, so it's no problem. Forced out from the protecting ignorance and flung back on his naked primal need. Primal, first in time, primary, and flung back on his naked primal need, he at length must cast from him his surface soul and be the ungarbed entity within.
Is that the he is referred to man?
Man has to do this. He has to cast from him this surface soul that's made of family, education, environment, work. All of these things have to be cast from us so we can become the ungarbed entity within. Ungarbed means naked, bare. And then when we don't have that covering, our psychic being comes forth.